All right, I want to take a few minutes to expand on what the book chapter has about requirements definition and go into a little bit about ambiguity and how you might assess and reduce it and maybe lack of understanding. Now, some good things in here. It comes down to 4 heuristics or things you can apply, and it's not made up. It comes from this excellent text, Exploring Requirements, Quality Before Design. You can look at it. It's a little legacy, 1989, but just a great tome on the process. I would recommend you get it if you end up in a career somewhere where requirements definition or interpretation is a big part of what you do, or if you're leading people who do it. But we're just going to touch on a few of the high points from it relevant to our chapter coming in. There's a lot you can say about requirements. I found a few adages. Lewis Carroll, wrote Mathematician and the books Alice in Wonderland and so forth. But if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And similarly, Yogi Berra, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So the idea that requirements, some sense of where you're headed, are needed. I like to contrast Microsoft's approach. They had, if you know where you're headed, we can help you. Your potential, our passion, or where you're going today. And that's very much how our book kind of looks at things. The idea that the user has some requirements or system or problem they need, and they're going to help you, by interviews and questionnaires, you can elicit those requirements and get a start on a system. And that certainly works. Steve Jobs famously said, well, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And there's something true there, especially, innovative products. People wouldn't have, maybe asked for the smartphones as they exist. They just wouldn't do, Henry Ford said, well, people would want a faster cow. If you asked them what they wanted, they wouldn't have envisioned the car. So there's something about, maybe for innovative products, that innovation coming. There's still requirements, but they're requirements not derived from the end user. They're derived maybe from the vision of where things are going to get, and from the authors of the book. If people don't know what they want, doesn't care how good your development process is, they won't be satisfied. All right, so that's really just setting a basis for the importance of requirements. And the book authors, did some research. I don't know how significant or trustworthy, but they did some experiments where teams of developers were given the same requirements, but each team had a different requirement that was ranked as the primary. We were looking at projects and different aspects on how they deliver and how you might evaluate that. But among the teams, same basic project, but one team was told to minimize store storage. Another team was supposed to maximize output readability and so forth. And what the authors found is developers delivered on what was asked. They got a system, but the feature that was asked for as the primary objective was almost always the feature that was delivered as the most significant. So key takeaways, and it's pretty obvious. If you tell what you want, you're likely to get it. If you don't tell what you want, you're unlikely to get it. So this idea of getting a good articulation of requirements and something reliable and unambiguous is important. So here we're kind of away from requirements in general to this notion of ambiguity. So when you get a statement, ambiguity means it may be open to more than one interpretation. Maybe it's inexact. And then example the authors use, suppose the requirement was create a means for protecting a small group of human beings from the hostile environment, elements of their environment. Okay, there's lots of things wrong with that as a requirement statement. It brings to mind, at least to me and to many of maybe some kind of structure and permanent, but maybe it's just a short time to protect, and what's the nature of the environment involved. So there's always maybe some missing information, a context. We'll work on some heuristics for getting that out. That's just one aspect of ambiguity. There's sometimes what are called introduced elements or assumptions that the person making the statement, they have in mind, but they never get it across in the requirement. Kind of hit on, are we talking like a house or a building to protect from weather or something, or if it's weather, is moving away excluded? That would be a means for protecting a small group. We'll just get out of the way of the tornado. You don't have to build a tornado barrier if that's the idea. So there's some things that maybe in the mind, introduced, or the mind of the reader. As I read this is what comes to mind. Might not have been in the mind of the person making the statement. Ambiguous words, they're small and group. Do the group have to interact, or is it just how can you get them? What's the meaning of hostile? And even in this simple statement, well, maybe it means the small group from hostile elements. Perhaps you really mean a hostile, maybe political environment or litigants. So you're really looking for legal protection for somebody, or maybe you're looking, the hostile environments outside. You don't want intruders or stray dogs to get in your yard, so that's considered hostile, and it can protect your family from those intruders. And this is these are very different interpretations of that basic requirement, and it just comes from this, notion. Language is inherently can be ambiguous, and we've got to work to the extent, you're taking a class, at least understand that it can be there. Where this ambiguity arises, understand that it's there and try to eradicate to the extent we can. And so I kind of got this from, just in natural language, the speaking. And, there's some examples over here. Some of them you can have some fun with them, but, words can have multiple meanings. This is in a different context. The phrasing of the thing, something about the Tibetan history teacher. Well, was it a regular history teacher who happened to be from Tibet, or was it a teacher who teach Tibetan history? It's unclear from that language statement. And is the dog on a bike when my dog chases anyone he sees on a bike, or is it if someone's on a bike, the dog will chase it? And you have probably what's most likely in that case. The dog probably doesn't ride a bike, but there's some fun with this. And by the way, if you want to analyze, some of the political scene, there's a lot of times the ambiguity is not tried to avoid; it's embraced for just that reason. So anything like all or no one, they ought to read, never. There's a saw about a true-false question that if it has never or always, it's got to be false, right? So that is, be careful of, kind of these quantifier offer, ever, each, all, and that kind of thing. That's different interpretations depending on context. The trucks that will freeze, or the roads that will freeze. The trucks shall treat the roads before they freeze. I've got to say, and I borrowed this from the internet, I don't quite get the dual interpretation of the one here. And sometimes if there's lack of any quantifiable measuring unit. So just realize, and I borrowed this saw too, I saw it, it's kind of funny, what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. So if you kind of aren't clear in what you're asking for, or what you're saying, or what you accept to do, then it's going to stay in vagueness all the way out to the end. So that's a little bit about ambiguity. And the authors in the book, and they have a lot of other great ideas, come up with 4 heuristics. Rules of thumb or best practices. That's the sense of a heuristic going on here for addressing ambiguity. And they're not rocket science. They're pretty easy to see how they work. And I encourage you, if you're in a situation requiring it, to remember this. Maybe go even back to the book. I'm talking in the future in your career. And see if you can apply them. And you will have, in exercises in this course, times where we say, can we reduce the ambiguity, or how might you do it? But anyway, we got 4 to talk about: the ambiguity pole, the memorization heuristic, the Mary had a little lamb heuristic, and the Mary conned the traitor heuristic. And the authors make the point of, if you're working with a group, whether it's your peers, like on a development team, or the users, the client that you're developing for, do this in a spirit of fun and discovery and brainstorming. And that little bit of time you do up front can save a whole lot of aggravation and expense and worry and fretting later. So you might say, oh, well, that's silly. It's not scientific, but it is. So ambiguity poll. If you're curious about whether ambiguity exists in something, build that structure to protect against hostile elements. One thing you might do is ask everybody, how long is this going to take to deliver? Or how much is it going to cost to deliver this, right? And just have them write it down and collect it, and then make a histogram. And if the results are all spread out, like in this top diagram, it just says there's not a good sense of what's going on in that requirement and what it's going to take to do it. So more discussion, more questionnaires, how can we get it better? The bottom one, maybe after some working out the differences, shows a more concrete understanding of, I think I know what we have in mind. So choose some aspect, measurable aspect of what's going on in the requirement, poll everybody, do a histogram, and if you have this kind of clustering, things are, you're on the road to being clearer. There's it's called the Delphi technique, and it's a bona fide way for trying to get diverse opinions to kind of condense around a central idea. You've probably read about it in some of your psychology or management or decision-making books, but the idea is you kind of take a poll like this, and then you ask the people on the ends, right, the outliers, okay, well, why do you think it's going to take, over 30 years to do this, if these are years? I mean, it's just arbitrary measure. And why do you think you can get this done in 6 months? And by them explaining and them explaining here explanations, then often you can get more of a consensus. But ambiguity poll, one way to get a sense, do we have some ambiguity going on here? Another one, and it's really pretty obvious and easy. We had a heuristic just a while ago, but it's not on the screen, right? So have everybody, put away, you read the heuristic, put away that slide, and just ask them to write verbatim what the requirement said, okay? And you will find often that, where the recall differs, there's ambiguity. And there's a tendency for maybe people to hear it once and run with it, maybe not look back at that specification or document. They're going based on their memory of what's going on. And great, so write it down for memory. And if there's wide differences, then that original statement isn't very memorable and therefore can lead to ambiguity. So what can you do then to make the statement more memorable? That's another heuristic for addressing ambiguity. The Mary Had a Little Lamb, I'm sure you've heard the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. Its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. The authors use this to say when you have a statement, emphasize individual words and phrases to see if different meanings emerge. If they do, then maybe it needs to be rewritten to reduce the ambiguity. And again, they will say in the book, okay, this sounds like frivolous and I could never do this in a business, but it does help to sometimes do that. Now, I've taken some examples from the text, and they're a little bit fun, but if you emphasize Mary, then you're sort of emphasizing that it wasn't Tom, Dick, or Harry's lamb. If you emphasize the word a in that, well, she had one, not several, right? Not some lambs. The little meant, oh, well, I'm emphasizing that it's a small lamb. And on it goes kind of word by word. They even, say what happens after, the 5 words are emphasized. So you get subtle differences. And if it's, if it's not true that she no longer has the lamb, then maybe that you need a different word there. But there's, different interpretations. And here's one where all 5 words lead to a conclusion, and maybe that's what you wanted, and perhaps that isn't. As contrasted with someone else who still has 4 large turtles. And I kind of like the way they finish up this on any requirement or any statement, kind of that comes out. Maybe, gosh, why are you telling me this? How is it actionable or useful to me? Is it helping me to build the system? And I've included the author's statement that it may seem silly, but they've saved their clients lots of money by just, let's take a few minutes and put words. I had a English professor one time who was a fiction writer. It was a substitute from the regular thing, so we went off a little bit. And he would you kind of emphasize when you write fiction, and I don't know if he did this and how true it really is. But if you're going to put something there, it should be important. If you say, the main character put on a red shirt, his opinion was, well, there ought to be a reason for that shirt being red. Maybe there's some either adventure or wanted to look apart or something. Otherwise, he put on a shirt, and maybe you can assume they put on a shirt. Why are you including this in there? How does it, in the case of a book, advance the story or the plot or give some insight into characters? Same thing in requirements, right? Why is that there? Great. But Mary Had a Little Lamb just says take the words and almost take it apart into the pieces and see if you're getting widely variation in meaning or some words or phrases that don't need to be there. Okay. And the Mary Con the Traitor heuristic, and this one is kind of fun. Everybody knows what that means. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. I know a picture you have, but a picture you could derive is, well, suppose Mary cheated someone, and then that someone that Mary cheated is out after him. And that's exactly what that is about. So Mary had a little lamb when you have somebody, you've taken advantage of them, right? You've cheated them, right? And a little lamb, well, who else do you take care of? A little lamb is somebody innocent, naive, and the best kind of person you want to take advantage of, right? If you're in that business. And when you take advantage of somebody, you fleece them, right? So, they were nice and pure, their fleece was white as snow, and Mary was able to grab it. But that traitor, is going to get his or her revenge, right? Because everywhere that Mary went, that lamb was sure to go. That traitor was following her till she got her back. Okay. Don't know. That's exactly where that nursery rhyme came from. But the point is, we had this obvious, set of words and, very clear what it means. The Mary Con the Traitor heuristic says, look for synonyms or alternatives. And if you're getting a bunch of them, then that indicates some ambiguity, and either by rewriting or working with whoever's going to consume the statement, make sure that they have the idea, the thing that you had in mind. And so, here the authors make their, look at had and have, different definitions, and lamb, and they come up with several variations, including, the one that I did, and I took it from them on here. And it could be also that, what Mary dined on, well, she had a little lamb and, risotto on the side with a nice glass of Merlot too. And all that does, maybe she gave birth to a lamb, and it's a ewe. So there are lots of interpretations in that. And so when it comes to requirements, something that somebody's going to act on, take money for, try to deliver a product, use this heuristic to try to eliminate any misunderstandings. Okay, and so per the text authors, and we're about done. They admonish me, all of us, to teach these heuristics to everyone who will ever have to construct or interpret a requirements document. And so that's kind of why I've included it. Just a little bit of fun with language, but it's this kind of thing, sort of have that maybe Doubting Thomas or show me, or am I sure I really have it before I go off and do the wrong thing. All right, so that's it.